This is the DJI FPV versus the DJI Avata 2. In this video, let's compare the older DJI FPV drone, the original FPV drone from DJI, compared to the DJI Avata 2. Before we begin though, thank you to Megadron for making this video possible by lending out the Avata 2 and the goggles and the controller for it. This video would not be possible without them. If you're interested in drones and action cameras, check them out. They're gonna be linked in the description. Once again, thank you for making this video possible. So in 2024, how does the DJI FPV stack up to the newer DJI Avata 2? Essentially, there are two different kind of drones and they both have their strengths and weaknesses. But how do they compare? Well, the DJI FPV, while its first version of the FPV from DJI, I feel like still holds up today because it's much stronger than Avata 1 and Avata 2. It is a bigger, heavier and stronger, faster drone than the Avata 1 and 2. And in this case, I would say it's just overall stronger and faster, and also much heavier. Where the Avata 2 is much easier to use and user-friendly, it is much lighter, and overall the usability is just easier. Taking this with you on a trip is much easier because of its weight and size. You can really easily take it into your backpack or a shoe bag, where this takes a little bit more consideration when traveling with it. On the other hand, this is much stronger and can really withstand higher wind situations, where this might have a little bit of a problem, not only because of its size and weight, but also because of its strength. I have to say that the Avata 2 has much better video recording than the FPV-1. The DJI FPV was never too good in recording, and I would say for maybe casual users or someone that just wants to fly with FPV, it's still good enough, but it just isn't wide enough and good enough of quality to use it in your higher production videos. Where the Avata 2 has a nicer picture profile with the D-Log-M compared to the D-Cinelike on the FPV, but also it's in 10-bit and the viewing angle is much bigger. So it's a little bit bigger. Thanks to this, you can see a little bit more. It just looks a little bit more cinematic and overall just better. And even for the flying experience, a wider field of view is much nicer. Usually on the FPV, I actually have an action camera strapped on top. As you can see, I have the place where I strap the camera on the top, and because of that I use the FPV kind of like a normal FPV where you see from the camera, but record with a separate action camera on the top. Thanks to this, I'm getting the best of both worlds. A lot of speed, strength and brute, force with the nice quality of the action camera on top. But I'm losing on the portability because, as you can see, it's not small, and also I'm losing on the battery life. And because of that, the Avata 2 can easily double the flight time of the DJI FPV. Overall, I just prefer the ease of use of the Avata 2, but the quality and the strength of the FPV is much better if you need that. If you're in a situation with high winds or maybe crosswinds, or if you want to do sharper turns, I think the FPV is just better for that. Where the Avata is much more user-friendly and it's just easier to fly lower to the ground because you're kind of feeling a little bit safer with the propeller guards and overall build quality. I feel like with the FPV, I'm always a little bit afraid to go too low, not to touch something that I break everything here. Where on the Avata 2, it just feels a little bit more safer. The propellers are something that is gonna save it, or at least make it less of an impact on it. I feel like for both of these drones, if you crash, you pretty much have to send them out to DJI for the repairs. So in both cases, they are gonna be sturdy. This one is gonna be a little bit better, but you're gonna have to send them out for repairs. It really depends on where you're gonna fly and how you're gonna fly. If you want to fly lower to the ground and just zoom past, maybe closer to people or objects and subjects, well, Avata 2 is gonna be the better pick. It's just easier to fly, it's much less noisy, really quiet, and it even has the C1 specification for this, but it does limit its speed in Europe to 69 kilometers an hour, which this can go way over 100 kilometers per hour. So it's really a case of strength, speed, and just overall carrying capabilities compared to something that is easier to use and slightly slower. Overall, just for the drones, I would say it depends on your flight characteristics. For example, in the windy ocean front, I would actually be a little bit more comfortable flying with this because of its strength. And this for me is like a park, or maybe, you know, somewhere you feel that you can really zip around between trees or close to the ground. It just feels a little bit more for that occasion. So it's really dependent on where you're gonna fly and the conditions in that place. And the goggles for the two drones are different too. With the FPV, we got the goggles V2, which are still my favorite to use because of the shape of my face and overall how they fit my face and how I see in them. I just really prefer the goggles V2, where on the new Avata 2 we have new goggles, which are the goggles 3. The goggles V2 are LCD screens, less color rendition and overall less quality, less resolution, but are really, you know, like tried and true. And these goggles actually can work with both the Avata 1 and the FPV. The new goggles 3 are actually a nice improvement over the goggles 2, which weren't the best for me because they didn't really feel too good for me. They really pressed on my nose and my cheekbones, and I really could not get the clear picture in them. And this one solves it really nicely. We have the battery and the GPS on the back, so no longer you have to have a battery in your pocket somewhere. Also the cables, and here is just on the back of the head where it's really nice, and then all you have to do is put the antennas up. This part goes on your forehead here, so no longer you're putting on the nose or anything. And the goggles, as you can see, they no longer have thick foam, rather it's just like a rubber foam that you don't have any sun or light splash into it, so you don't really have any leaks into the viewing of the screens, which by the way, they're OLED and full HD, so 1080p, really sharp, really nice color rendition, and really easy to use because all you have to do is put it like this over your forehead. And now we have this on the back with the battery and the GPS, and here we have this on the forehead, and the goggles can be adjusted back and forth to meet your needs. It's really easy to use, really comfortable, I would say. Just overall a huge improvement over the goggles 2, which were nice, lighter, smaller, but just not for everyone. This solves this problem, I would say, for most people, which is really nice. I really like the goggles 3. And for both, you can use a different remote controller in terms of the motion controllers. For FPV, the motion controller 1, and for the Avata 2, the motion controller 3. And for more manual flyers, you actually have a FPV controller for the FPV, and this one actually works with the FPV and Avata 1. And while I don't have the new controller, which looks really similar other than not having the antenna on top, so basically the antenna is built in and it works only with the Avata 2, but it's pretty much the same controller, just with slight differences. Overall, I wished Avata 2 was something in between of the Avata 1 and FPV, but we are here and it's actually a little bit different. It's much more like an evolution of the Avata 1. It isn't as strong as the FPV. It is better in terms of being smaller, lighter, easier to use, easier to get into, better transmission signal, and better camera. While the FPV is still the stronger of the FPVs from DJI, it still is the king in terms of like the speed and strength, but it isn't as good in terms of transmission and the quality in terms of recording. So for me, they both have their use case scenarios, and I can't really say which one I like more. I just feel like it depends on the situation. If it's windy and maybe like outdoorsy, I really like the FPV, where it's not as windy and I can fly a little bit lower, I prefer the Avata 2. Overall, both of them have their strengths and weaknesses. It's really up to you which one is more for you. If you want to know more about drones, either new or visiting the older models, don't forget to subscribe down below.